Hello, everyone. Thank you all for dialing in today for what we feel is a really important discussion about being an active ally, self-empowerment and advocacy, the inherent benefits of having a strong business mentor, and so much more. We feel so lucky that these five amazing women who represent all corners of the A&D industry have agreed to be here today and share a bit of their personal stories, experiences, and of course, advice. In order to avoid me having a total fangirl moment and potentially having the introductions go on for far too long, I am going to throw to each of the ladies and give them an opportunity to give their bite-sized bios to the audience. Let's start with Carol. Carol Kurth is the principal of Carol Kurth Architecture and Interiors. Welcome, Carol. Can you give us a bit of your background?
Sure, we'll do the bite-sized bio. Thanks so much for hosting this. It's exciting to be part of the conversation. I'm an architect, interior designer. I wear many hats. I've been an educator. I've been a contractor, of course, a parent and a mentor. But my niche has been the luxury design market. And we've been working with the credo of architecture as a backdrop for living and interiors as an inspiration for lifestyle. And that's sort of been the envelope that we're working with from a design perspective, but there's always been advocacy as a foundation of the firm, as well as mentorship and scholarship. So bringing those all together, I've been at the helm for 25 years at our firm, and we have a team of 8 architects and designers. Majority are women, and it's pretty exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next, we have Gina Ford, principal and co-founder of Agency Landscape and Planning.
Gina. Hey, everyone. Thrilled to be here. Hey, Lindsay. I'm Gina Ford. I'm a landscape architect and principal with Agency Landscape and Planning. We're a 3-year-old practice. I leapt from a big job at a big firm, Sasaki, where I was there 21 years and was a principal at that firm to start this mission-driven practice. I'm an optimist. I love landscape as a public good, as a democratic space. And so I design urban public spaces and a lot of waterfronts. I'm an extrovert and a proud mom of a trans kid. So that's me.
And a Beyonce lover. Nobody knows lyrics like Gina. Next, we have Paula McDonald, founder of Paula McDonald Design, Build, and Interiors.
Hi, well, welcome, and thanks everybody for joining in, and kudos to all my panelists here, and especially Lindsay for putting all this together in ABC Stone. So I'm a little boutique firm that really decided, really by design from experience, that there was a way, even though it's counterculture, to integrate design, architecture, and construction in Manhattan. I've done ground up projects outside the city, but being only 12 years old, I thought that Manhattan really had an opportunity for, I'm going to say, the underserved markets at that time, which was people buying their first apartments here. And we do everything from design, expediting, filing. I have several architects that I work with exclusively for my firm, and construction, through completion. And I really am passionate about, and probably unfortunately my business is my baby because it takes too long and we're tiny, about elegant simplicity and how, which I think is very funny if you read the real estate section of the Times this past weekend, that understated luxury is key. Well, it's always been key. And I think a lot of my counterparts here have all been doing that. And happy to see that we're all here together to talk about about how women really are, I think, great leaders in this multitasking environment.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paula. Farah Ahmad, public sector architect with a focus on sustainable design.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So happy to join this amazing group of panelists. I'm glad that all of you can join us here today. I work for the public sector, as Lindsay just mentioned. I have been in city government for about 8 years now. I have worked at several agencies. So I've dabbled in energy engineering. I've been a plans examiner at the buildings department here in New York City for energy code. And currently I've continued that trek onto sustainable design standards. So my focus has really been on the technical standards development and research side. So we look at energy certifications, we look at LEED, we look at energy code, and we look at the package of green building local laws that govern our building portfolio. And I've also become an environmental enthusiast because of my work in architecture stemming from that passion and sustainability. So thanks for joining, everyone.
Great. And finally, we have Phyllis Harbinger, who is an interior designer, author, speaker, business strategist, as well as the founder of DCI Studio. Phyllis?
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Lindsay. It's a pleasure to be here with one of my dear friends, Carol, and I'm so grateful to be with this esteemed group of women to talk today. You're all rock stars. I'm also an educator. I teach a studio class every semester at FIT. I'm in my 22nd year. So mentoring is very important to me, and I love bringing all of that into my coaching business that I have. I wrote a book about 4 or 5 years ago, the Interior Design Productivity Toolbox, and that launched a coaching business, which was something I had never anticipated. So that was a really beautiful bonus. And just being able to be there and support women. I've had my company for about 28 years, and it is all women. We've had one male employee, and that was a long time ago. I don't know why, but it's just who gravitates here. And I love to mentor my employees and interns and see them grow and go on to bigger and better things, or stay, as the case may be. And it's really been a wonderful journey in the world of design. So I'm excited to hop into some topics that hopefully will help all of you out there. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, all of you. As for me, I am Lindsay Tyler. I'm the VP of Marketing and Creative Director for ABC Stone. I want to thank ABC for sponsoring today's panel. Though it obviously has little to do with Stone, ABC is a company that believes in gender parity and really values the contributions of women both in our company and throughout the industry. And when I raised the idea of hosting a panel of this nature during October, they immediately hopped on board. So thank you so much for that. Also, we will be taking audience questions later, so please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box below as you think of them, and we hope to get to all of them a bit later on. So I guess right off the bat, I'd like to say that we aren't breaking any ground here when we point out that architecture, construction, engineering, design have long been male-dominated fields. Much of this has been written about, it's been discussed and picked apart from myriad angles. And though it's frequently talked about, I would say the issue, it's openly identified, but the path toward change has been very slow. Many of us are familiar with the fact that while women account for nearly half of the graduates from architecture programs, they make up only between 15 and 20%, depending on whose account you read, of licensed architects. And the factors that are most often cited as reasons for that are the wage gap. In the US, women make about 86% of what men make across many industries, and the architectural trades are no exception. Second, the job itself turns out to be less creatively stimulating, and the work is much more intensive in terms of expectations of hours worked than architecture students expect before they actually get into a practice. Plus, the licensing requirements are so extensive that the timeline can really come up against the desire for a family or a work-life balance. So all of that, plus the lack of mentorship in the practice, I've heard cited as a really big issue. There's this idea that humans tend to gravitate toward those who look like they do or identify with their interests. And as a result, managers, who are most often male, tend to choose male staff to mentor and develop and groom for promotion, which also speaks to the snowball effect of gender inequality in the business. I know this is a topic that a few of our panelists have some really strong opinions and great experience with. So let's start with Gina. Gina, can you help define for us the key differences between sponsorship and mentorship, and tell us why both are important?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I'm probably not the only one to know those terms in this group of esteemed women, but sponsorship is that thing that I always come back to. It's a concept I think put forward by Sylvia Ann Hewlett in a book, a kind of small publication called The Sponsorship Effect. And she talks about the difference between a mentor who might give you casual, good advice, might have lunch with you occasionally, kind of sounding board, versus a sponsor, someone who really uses their power to advance you in the profession. And when this publication talks about how challenging it is for women because we don't get sponsorship at the same rate that men do, for exactly the reasons you said. It's easier to nurture and sponsor someone that looks like you. Also because we have different ideas about what women leadership looks like. And so it's less rewarded if you bring something different to the table. And so sponsorships, great sponsors, and I think part of the reason why I've done well in even the male-dominated places I have in my career, use their power, put you in the right spot, push you into the deep end before you're ready for it, believe in you. It's an exchange. You do something great for them, they do something great for you. And men do that for each other really invisibly. I knew a lot of male leaders who would say, oh no, I did it on my own. I worked my way. And I'm like, no, somebody helped you along the way. Maybe you don't see it, but it doesn't happen to the same level for women. So it's an important concept. I think I tell graduating students, go someplace where you're going to have a sponsor. Mentors are great, but go someplace where someone's really going to want to use their capital on your behalf.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Thank you for breaking that down. It's interesting to consider the difference between the knowledge that having personal advocates and women who support your career is important versus actually having a plan or a strategy to help you build your professional tribe. Phyllis, I think you have some intimate knowledge of this conundrum, and I'd venture to say that's probably why you, despite having a thriving design business of your own, decided to branch out and develop a consulting and strategy end of your business, where you put a lot of focus on helping women have the confidence to advocate for themselves and develop a solid plan to get where they really want to be. Can you talk about what you've learned maybe for yourself through years of working with women coming up in the industry, and any tips you have for the viewers about how to start this process of self-advocacy?
Sure. So I think my journey started when I walked into FIT the first day. I had a career prior to design. I was in international relations and marketing. Go figure. But in any event, I had a professor that I used as my avatar. And I love that word. I think that when you can find someone that you can mirror or want to aspire to be like, but with your own spin, it's very helpful. And she was a professor there. She was a designer. She lived in a town near me. I ended up interning for her. She's now the dean of the New York School of Interior Design. And so our paths have changed, but it was always good to know that I could ask her for advice and go to her for strategy, et cetera. And she actually pushed me to do certain things to advance my career. And then I had a ton of mentors that were my professors. And when I started teaching at FIT, one of them was like, you need to go here and write a book. You need to go here and teach this. And, you need to do this with your business. So there were a lot of people that were very, very strategic in my growth. And with my coaching business, I love to tell people, you've got to figure out, first of all, who's your ideal client and go after them. But then what's the ideal job? What do you want to be doing? Because some people just get stuck in this lane and they don't understand that there's a lot of ways to veer off the beaten path and get to a better place, perhaps, than you're in right now. So I feel that that's something that is my mojo that I can bring in. And I kind of see from the higher level what they're doing and then bring them back in and zoom in on it. So people don't see what's in front of them. Sometimes they need somebody else to do that for them. And that's a big deal. And I find that I have an accountability buddy. We speak every single day. And we call each other out if we're not holding each other accountable. So it's important to set yourself up for success and have the right people surrounding you. Always look to who you think is doing something you're not yet and go aspire to know them or someone like them.
Yeah, that's so smart. And I think that it can be difficult to put yourself out there and to walk into a room and sort of hone in on the person that you kind of is kind of a shero to you in the room, and then walk up to them and just say, hey, can we grab a coffee, or can we talk, or can I shoot you an email? I just have a couple more questions. I think that it is really important to be able to do that. And that is something that I think a lot of people just struggle with. So that's really good advice. I want to throw it to Carol for a minute, because she, to me, is sort of one of the original women who has just advocated in this industry for a long time, for other women. And one of the ways that she did that was instituting a paid family leave policy in her boutique firm. And Art Digest actually wrote an article, excuse me, on this topic back in 2018. And it was a great read. And they really highlighted this effort on her part. And despite having no regulations that necessitated it, and long before the state of New York rolled out its paid family leave program, she put this policy in place. Carol, can you tell us a bit about that decision and what prompted you to take that step, and what the policy entails, and how you feel your practice has benefited or not from it?
Interestingly enough, I never actually really thought of it as a policy. I just thought of it as sort of a humane thing to do. I guess in part because I never had that. You know, when I was having my kids, I was seriously, I'm not kidding, like working while I was in the delivery room. I'm not joking. Long labor, looking at, I had calls. It was a crazy time. But I had a meeting with a client like not even a week later. I did not have any of those opportunities of work-life balance. I was at the time in practice with my former husband, who's also an architect, and we had a construction and a development business, which was like a 24/7 situation. And when I formed my own firm, one of the things I thought about was, I would really like to have women in my firm have these opportunities that I didn't have. And it started with a lot of work-life balance. And my firm is primarily women and has been. We have one fantastic and wonderful male teammate. He's amazing, but he's surrounded by all of us, of course, remotely right now. And, he's benefited by this as well, this remote work aspect, which we've been doing for years. And having the opportunity for, let's say, when they were having a baby, we had disability plan that they could take advantage of. We could use up vacation days in advance, accrue those things. Also, sort of, your job is your job. You can have it back 3 months from now, 6 months from now, in whatever little bit or bite you can, because I recognized even 20 some odd years ago that we were losing women in the profession. And these are talented people who have worked and gone to school and devoted their lives and careers. They want to be a designer, they want to be an architect. Just because they had children, does that mean they have to leave the workforce and leave a team and leave behind all that they, achieved? So we did lots with people working remotely even 15 years ago. As soon as, computers had the ability to be able to log in, we were early adapters of being able to do that. Not to mention also helped when we had snowstorms, power outage, and all sorts of other things where we could work remotely. But this idea of also phasing back in to the work life as your child develops and grows, and also the flexibility. I didn't want people missing out on, that fantastic school play that your child is in, or the day that you could go on the field trip with your kids to school. So one of the little pieces and dynamics when I opened my firm is I looked for a location that was going to be literally within 5 miles of my house and within close proximity to my children's school at the time. And I landed as a storefront in Bedford Village because I also wanted to feel like I was a window on the community and being able to have people feel that they could just come in, say hello, see what we're up to. Just a more welcoming aspect as opposed to architecture in some high-rise tower that nobody knows you're behind a closed door. So it's just a very different approach to how I saw, my practice evolving, and also having that work-life balance for the people who are working on my team.
So have you been able to retain talent because you've been able to extend these benefits to them?
There's
Yeah.
no question, absolutely. I have 3 teammates who've worked with us for over 20 years, and I have several who are 15 years, 5 years. I have one recent hire, actually, who we hired during COVID, but somebody I've known for about 6 years. So yeah, that was an interesting opportunity too. But yes, definitely. And we have 2 people in the office right now who are expecting, and I have every expectation that they will take advantage of, the disability, the phase-in programs, working when they can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I hope they stay with us for a really long time and have that enjoyment of the work-life balance.
Yeah. And, I think that this is something that comes into focus for a lot of women, and their partners when they are pregnant. And I think that, I can speak very openly in this forum and say that I think I was like sort of tangentially aware of this as a huge problem in society, but like, I think until it affects you sort of very viscerally, it can feel kind of far off. And I know that during this time, when both my husband and I are, working remotely, we have a 20-month-old, and we've been able, like, we look at each other probably like 5 times a week and say, like, did Kai do that at this age? And like, we don't know because we weren't there. Like our kid was in daycare and now he has a nanny and he's home. But so we just get to see him so much more. And it's been a really interesting parenting experience because, we're talking about a 3-year difference between the two. So it's not like we're looking back from some really long lens. We're looking back pretty, in the pretty immediate distant past. And we're going, wow, like we're just experiencing so much more of our child than we were able to before. So I think that really speaks to the need in our community and in our country writ large to really be advocates for parents and children and sort of the codependency that is there innately.
That is so true, Lindsay. And I think a lot of that is one of the, if you could call it a silver lining of COVID, is that there's so many people who have really formed so many closer connections with their children. And they would miss out otherwise because they'd be commuting by the time they get home, their child is ready for bed or in bed. And that is really one of the amazing outcomes that we're seeing. But on the other hand, it's a real struggle for parents to do their jobs and to do their work, because I can see a lot of my team, they're working like 2 hours in the morning, then they're with their children, then their kid is nap time. And so, we're not communicating and they're not working during that time. Then after their child goes to bed, they're working another 3 hours. And so there's a lot of exhaustion and, trying to work that balance too, because sometimes you start to feel like you're not doing any of your jobs 100%. And so how do you feel good about all of them or any of them? It's a really, and every day is different,
Yeah, I know. I am aware. Yes, but I think
it's different.
It's important, I think, to recognize that. And I think that, the more our male counterparts recognize that too, and sort of pick up the mantle also, I think that's really crucial to expanding this knowledge and sort of making it something that more people are concerned about than just the people it's directly affecting. So just for background, I will say that I did not know Farah prior to this call, and Carol recommending that she would be great for this panel. But the moment I spoke with her during our first prep call, I was just completely enamored. Not only because we share a mutual passion for sustainability and pretty much eco anything, but because she really took her passion and turned it into a somewhat non-traditional role in the architectural field. And I just loved that story. So I would love, Farah, if you could speak to that decision and tell us about your path and how it's working out for you now. I would love to share that story.
Sure, it's been a really interesting journey, and Carol knows really well. The last decade has been sort of an evolution, and I'd love to explain how that path became to provide a little inspiration or to provide shed some light on this career path and where it can lead to. So obviously in school, we're taught to become an architect and we receive a lot of training and formal education as a designer. But interestingly enough, my passion for sustainability actually stemmed from my formal training and not the reverse. And that's because I had, back in 2010 to 2011, I had this exposure to a US Department of Energy competition. It's the Solar Decathlon. It's a public event that takes place every 2 years typically, and it's great for the audience to check out this competition. Anyway, it's this competition where participants are encouraged to design, build, and operate a solar-powered home. And you get a great chance to look at different residential applications and evolving technologies. At the time, I was just a college student, and my formal training again was a very linear path. But we got to take a look at a lot of these technologies, and we worked with engineers and consultants and contractors, and got this really great hybrid and very diverse collaboration experience. And so I was able to take that experience, gauge how interested the public was in engaging with the technical experts, and kind of got into this climate change movement. And what happened was my initial experience was with the New York City Department of Design and Construction, where we were looking at 300,000 square foot plus buildings. We were walking into them, and I got to learn a lot about specialty consultants, broaden my eyes to the different career paths. But it was really my first experience at the School Construction Authority, where I took that public experience and that initial impression of the public sector, and was able to evolve it into sort of a 2.5 year experience with that energy engineering aspect, where we were taking a look at buildings, retrofitting them for lightings, and it was leading to this massive energy savings. So once my brain was sort of wrapping its head around this energy aspect, and I got a little bit more experience, I took that and went to the New York City Department of Buildings and became an energy code plans examiner, and really gained more of an appreciation for city policy, energy code, and the application to both commercial and residential projects. And I was able to see beyond the world of just lighting and look at other building systems and understand that very diverse approach. But it was a very natural progression from that design and surveying and engineering into this standards development and how that shapes design. And so I was looking at mechanical systems, building envelopes, understanding how airtight or how much insulation a building needs to really evolve, and really understand industry trends and how that influences the industry as a whole. And a lot of these energy codes and standards and things that we're wrapping our heads around really also dictates manufacturer trends. So it trickles down into this other world of energy performance, that it's not just limited to the construction and operation of the building, but it's this whole other aspect of architecture. And fast forward to now, where I work at the School Construction Authority, and I'm back with school buildings, but we're looking at other certification standards. We have the New York City Green Schools Guide, which encompasses energy code and green building policies, but it's a great way to really dive into that advocacy aspect. And so that is really what what the challenges have been over the last few years, is understanding environmental policy and how New York City takes that and influences the trends for the future.
It's amazing. I mean, every time I kind of hear you speak about that, I just gain a whole new admiration, just because I do think that to be able to sort of see an opening and ride your passion right into a career is huge. I mean, that's massive, and kudos to you for seeing that and having the strength to do it. I'm sure a lot of your fellow classmates weren't like, yes, I want to go work for the city of New York. That seems like the glamorous architecture job I was down for, so I think the fact that you did that and you're doing this important work and you're doing it incredibly well is it's huge. So thank you for that. I want to talk to Paula for a second. being a woman, I met Paula at a breakfast pre-COVID, so 1 million years ago, and we met at a breakfast, and the minute she opened her mouth to speak, I was like, oh, that's a woman to be reckoned with. And that was just sort of my inner monologue. And when we talked about doing this panel, I knew that I really wanted her to be involved. As she introduced herself, she owns a boutique design build firm with a focus on condos, townhouses, and brownstones in Manhattan. So working in the very heavily red taped zone of New York City construction, I would imagine that it hasn't always been easy to gain the respect or break through the inherent male bias that exists, whether it's from tradesmen on a site or a project manager. Paula, can you talk about the tools you've developed to tackle unconscious bias and microaggressions in your professional life?
Well, I don't think you can define it that way, actually. I mean, I had to think about what does that mean, you know, because you can blur the lines, and I see it at a higher level than what you experience in the field, because a large part of our practice is really apartments, you know, condos and co-ops, and I see it at a higher level than just the field, and I'll talk about both, but at a higher level it's really co-op boards and building management, okay? And all those levels of working in a vertical environment, it starts at the top, and then you find, I really can tell you that when I walk across any job site, I don't encounter any women. I mean, I may come across, because most people don't manage their project. Well, Carol probably did, and maybe Phyllis did, but I manage my projects. I don't know about Gina, but I really manage I'm very hands-on, because as you all know, the devil's in the details. And so I'll just show up, you know, I mean, and I show up all the time, and I work with great people, men who I have 3 crews, but they have kind of gotten to know me the hard way, in the sense that if they're wrong, and if an engineer is not correct on their specing, let's just say, and this is all technical, but when you're specifying a window installation and the flashing, and how is that going to meet the interiors, and you've got a landmark situation, and you've got to know that what you think you're proposing and what the client is buying to build it out is going to work. I've run into conflicts with some of the biggest engineering firms, where I've kind of had to politely battle, you know, I'm like, say, this just doesn't work, you know, I mean, in my own way, and it's several meetings, and it's a waste of time. And in the end, you have to really, I think, unfortunately, we spend more time as women getting the recognition and having someone hear us. No matter how many times I have to say it, it's never the first time. It's just amazing. It's probably taken me 10 years where I have, you know, some of these larger engineering firms, whether they're Wallace and Mangione and any of those guys, who finally have encountered me, and I'm small enough that, you know, we don't do as many of we aren't on the short list of these larger projects bidding for hospitality or commercial. We don't do any of that. And I think it ends up becoming, unfortunately, a situation where you are proving yourself technically, which is more effort, you know, in terms of respect. And I see Gina, you know, I mean, she's with a bigger firm. You have to be politically correct. I found that I've had to really curb my anger, and you have to put it in a completely unemotional communication format at any level. And I mean, at any level. And it just, I kind of had to learn that. And I think I've then become much more, I just won't work with, and I have to work with buildings when they're doing the asbestos abatement and removing asbestos and putting in windows, and, you know, all of what we're doing for the bigger picture. And I can't step on their toes, and yet I have to say, well, that's not right. That's not right. It's, you know, and how do you do that without having it, you know, having somebody roadblock your project, which they can do by just, you know, not scheduling time to show up, and time is money. And so you have to be very careful. Well, what I find, I'm very measured, because time is money and I have to get it done. And I'm working with Hispanic, Eastern European. I mean, you're talking about folks that don't have college degrees on the crew side, and yet they respond. What I'm finding is that they just respond to respect at every level, and that's the level I go to when I'm on a construction site. But when I'm dealing with the management level and up, it's more about unfortunately having to prove that you know what that you know.
So it's not even just getting the answer right, it's showing your work too. Whereas I feel like sometimes if a man just says 2 + 2 is 4, everyone's like, yeah, that's right. And if you say it's 4, they're like, how'd you get to that though?
I had to have a meeting.
Right.
I had to have a meeting. I have had to have, the building, the board, the power.
Watch you do the mechanics. Yeah.
In a larger project, and the engineer and the building architect, and then me, who's saying it might not work.
Well, and then when time is money, the fact that you've had to have this meeting 5 times to talk about, your stance on the matter, then you can't get those hours back. And as a small firm, I'm sure that that's meaningful.
And then you have to change the specifications. So you're talking as an architect, whether you're a building architect or, because it's a big deal about the envelope. It's a big deal about all these things.
Sure. Everything matters to,
And you have to respectfully disagree, and it just takes forever.
Well, that struck me when you were answering too, because you said, I have to politely battle. And I thought to myself, sometimes men just battle. They're not super concerned about being polite about the whole thing. So
that's the point. That's the whole point. Like, we could do an SNL skit about this. It's like where when we use certain words and it becomes sexist.
You're aggressive and you're angry, as opposed to when, you can't just say what you're thinking, because you have to couch it and you have to make everybody else comfortable around it.
I encounter that all the time in the political realm of projects.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's unfortunate, because really, like, let's just get the job done. And I think that, it kind of stinks that you have to be more cognizant than your male counterpart of phrasing and being very aware of other people's feelings.
Now, on the other hand, the client, I am very adept at pulling the client out of the mix, right? I'm sure we all do this as women. I mean, I do. And I'm like, okay, whether you're the OCD male Wall Street guy, and we cut to the chase, but I don't have all these other ears listening. And that's usually how I can manage conflict.
Yeah. It's interesting. As Carol and I were prepping for this call, we spoke about a great many things. In fact, when I raised this topic with her, she said, so how long do we have? 3 hours? And I was like, I think we're just going to try and fit it into 1. But I got it, because I mean, like, our initial call went on for 2 hours. But as we were prepping for this call, we spoke about, she mentioned that it can be very hard, despite having won many design and architecture awards for past projects, that it's still a challenge to get shortlisted for larger commercial or hospitality projects. Now, Paula just said you aren't working on those, and that's I think because your firm is focused on townhouses and but Carol, you run the gamut. So why do you think that is? Why have you had trouble getting on that short list?
It's very interesting. I don't even know if I'd call it a short list, because you have to get on the list to be on a short list.
Right.
So, I mean, look, my firm has been focused on this luxury market for many, many years. And some of these luxury homes are far more complicated than any, apartment building or amenities. We've done indoor pools and gyms and complicated mechanical systems and solar, systems and envelopes and scale of buildings. I mean, some of the homes are, quite enormous, over 15,000 square feet with amenities and so on. They certainly would fit into a small hospitality type of arena. But yet I don't think that there are a lot of what I'll call developer clients or what have you who are delving into the luxury architecture firms to even consider, I guess, asking them. It's almost like that you have to do one to get one. And it's really hard to get that first one. But once you get that first one, you're probably able to get many more. I mean, it's a challenge in that regard, you know, being getting a seat at the table, so to speak. You know, I don't play golf because I don't have, you know, 8 hours to devote to playing golf. You know, you know, there's sort of I would say connections and networking that, because I am balancing so many other things and wearing many hats, and you know, when you're doing all that, you don't have the luxury of all those other hours to be out, you know, socializing or networking in some of these other places. And right now with COVID, it's a real strategic challenge to see how you can get in front of other people and how you can network, how can you leverage your connections. You know, I've been very fortunate that I have a really fantastic group of clients over these years, many clients who are repeat clients, not just once, not just twice, but multiple times, and even the next generation from that set of clients. So, you know, building on that is amazing. And yet each of those probably has opportunities in other realms that they could call on us as an architect. And some have over the years. I won't say they won't, but you know, I just think that we're not thought of first for that sort of thing. And why is that? How do you change that strategy? How do you maneuver that? Right now I'm actually working on a very interesting project that does involve residential commercial. And I'm really excited because it will put me in that sphere. We're just in the very early stages. So maybe after all this time, we'll get into something that's pretty exciting in that realm, but
Yeah.
difficult to get there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that that sentiment can that thread could be drawn, you know, through any kind of career shift or any kind of anything that we come up against in life. It's sort of like you have to get one, you know, and then maybe more will come. But yeah, there is this idea that like taking a chance on you know, somebody new is a challenge, and you know, remains to be seen. But so I want to throw over to Gina for a second. One of the major things that I admire so deeply about Gina is that she worked her way to the top of Sasaki, you know, which is a major multidisciplinary international firm, and she earned the title of principal, and she was on their executive committee. And then instead of maybe taking a break and enjoying the fruits of her labor, she resigned and started what she referred to earlier as a mission-driven practice called Agency Landscape and Planning. So Gina, I would love for you to talk about your thought process before and during that shift, and what that move has meant for you personally and professionally.
Yeah, well, I have so many notes. I feel like I need to send everyone an email later of all the things that we heard, and that all the things that I was processing there. There was so much richness to what was discussed. Yeah, I had a really wonderful 20 plus years at Sasaki. It was a really great place for me, especially in my first decade there when I was learning, because I didn't even have a landscape degree when I was hired into their landscape practice. I was a CAD drafter. So I worked my way up. I got my master's degree, came back, became a principal, became the first woman principal in their landscape practice in that office in Boston. And it was wonderful for a really long time. I think that the higher you get and the more leadership you get and the more you demonstrate excellence and ask for excellence, we know this about women. It becomes a mark on you, you know, and it's not Sasaki. Sasaki is just part of the world that we live in, a world where it's still more hard for women to get elected to positions when they're campaigning. Right? So they're seen unfavorably when they ask for power, where we know like orchestras, when they have auditions, are more likely to hire more women if it's invisible, it's just by sound and not by sight. And so these are the very real challenges. And this is what we just heard here. It's like, especially when you're in a leadership position, when you're supposed to be leading, and all of this bias around what that should look like, and that you should be polite, and that you should that you know the right answer, and you have to somehow be apologetic about that and humble about that. I mean, it's a pretty hard thing to toe. I think so there's that whole sort of like being a woman in a male environment that gets tiring. And then there's the bigger point, which is that we were doing a lot of work at Sasaki that was really hard to do in a big firm. It was public work, it was high engagement, high community, high touch, doesn't pen out as the most profitable work, and that puts you in a less powerful position in a male-dominated practice. And so my business partner and I, we were both principals at Sasaki. We started talking just offline about how could we do this work better? You know, how could we do this work more purposefully, be less driven by the dollar, still be profitable, and create a business. I love, Carol, what you were talking about, create a business where women can thrive, where we're not always pushing that rock up this fucking hill, you know? And so we were like, you know, one day she said, we should just go do this on our own. Why are we trying to invent this inside something else? And I said, let's just it's such a good place. We have such good opportunities. Let's stick it out. And then I had one last little straw that sort of the last of the paper cuts, where someone said to me, like, just, you know, I asked for some opportunity to lead some project, and they said, oh, don't listen to them, just prove them wrong. You always do. And I'm like, I'm done proving anybody else wrong. I'm done. I want to go just do I want to do this. I want to believe in myself. I want to have the autonomy to do this myself. And so I said to Bree, okay, let's go start it. So we started Agency, and it's been an absolute blast. It's been so hard and so much learning in every direction at the same time. It's kind of hard to believe. And we've gone from 3 people where I think we're 13 or 14 now within 3 years. So it's big growth, but we're stable, we're happy, we're doing the work we want to do. We make money. We make the money that we should make doing this kind of work, and we're not trying to make some crazy profit that the work can't support. So you know, it feels like we're living our whole selves, our whole lives. And it's been great. So.
I love that story. I think to be living an authentic life and to be living, you know, really, really using your education and your background to further your, you know, self-actualization is a really big goal for me personally. And I think for most women and most people. So, I mean, kudos to you. That's massive. And every day when like I'm looking at the accomplishments that you've had, I'm amazed. So
and I just want to say, you know, thank you for that. You're so sweet to me, Lindsay. I think that when I was at Sasaki, I always saw myself, I was always so motivated by making a path for women. I just felt like when you have that kind of power, you just have to put it into action. And so it's been, I've been trying to figure out how to channel that. I've like started my own advocacy group. You know, I do all this other work now. I've taken what was an internal to a universe of a practice to like I love Phyllis, your story about becoming a coach like that. That's like the dream, right? That you achieve a level of mastery and then you start giving it all away. So anyway, it's very exciting.
So can I just jump in on that? I think that's really great, Gina. That was amazing. You know, it's just what you said just resonated with me for that moment of when I made that decision to go on my own. I had been approached by when I was going through the divorce with my former husband 25 years ago, I was approached by one of our competitors to join them. And I thought to myself, I need to design my own life with my own path and forge it the way I want to do it, which sort of led to all of these women-focused initiatives. And at the time, I also decided that I was going to form a Women in Architecture Committee for Westchester. And so that became another piece. And like, I just started to build upon those little pieces of advocacy and foundation. I started a scholarship for women in architecture. Like, I just started to do a whole series of things that felt that authentic me, that I knew I couldn't have done with my former husband because it just wasn't, you know, about me then. It was, and not that it's only about me, but it was really what I had a passion to do so that I could give away. And it's just that same thing. It's like you lead and then you do want somebody to carry it forth. It's an interesting dynamic. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. So sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and I just remember tapping into Farah when I was leading the architecture school. There's an alumni group, an architecture alumni group. I did it for about 8 years, and I was tapping into some of these really enthusiastic students, and Farah was one of them. And just to see how she's grown and how she's just led in her own way with her own path, it's just so amazing. It's very gratifying.
Thank you, Carol. I think it speaks actually to that previous subject of mentorship, where when you see that passion that's contagious and you see that it's spreading over an entire community, which is what Carol did for CCNY, it kind of gives you that urge to want to give that back, just pay it forward. And Carol had such an impact on our school community, and it was amazing to see how it trickled down to a larger community of students that wanted to aspire to something beyond graduation. So when you see that, it really inspires you. It shows you what impact having that mentor has over your career, and it inspires you to want to carry that forward. It has a huge impact. It sounds a little cheesy, but it's true. You remember that going out of school, and it's something you want to carry forward. And actually, I also really just want to speak back to that subject of women having to advocate for themselves. There's a little positivity. I think that, this idea that women are having to prioritize family responsibility over everything, and that becoming sort of this setback or a reason why women may not advance in their careers or maybe may not be given enough opportunity. I really think with COVID, there is a silver lining. I think that women are going to be given more opportunities just because now we have this flexible work schedule. We're able to work remotely, we're able to shift our hours. And I really think that women are going to be able to balance out their schedules because of that. And I think it's going to level the playing field for women for sure.
So that was actually a question that I had that I'd wanted to throw out to the whole group. Perfect lead in, Farah. We've spoken for a long time, I think, about the importance of flexible work hours and remote work options and job sharing and other considerations that really encourage a healthy work-life balance. And COVID brought all of these options to the table for real-time testing. And it was kind of this forced experiment that largely has been successful in a lot of capacities. And we want to continue to build on that success, but it does make it harder, I think, sometimes for your work to be seen. So it can feel like accomplishments are happening, but they're happening in a vacuum. And it's a little harder to have a real seat at the table when, people aren't, it's a tree falling in the forest sometimes, or that's how it can feel. So how can we amplify our own accomplishments in a time when actually seeing our bosses or our coworkers or higher ups in our company is not possible?
It is a challenge. It's, I think it's a challenge on multiple levels. One is internally with your team, being able to assess how they're doing. And especially right now, COVID, there's a lot of stress. You have your teammates who are, not only if they have young children, they might be in school and they're also being teachers. All of a sudden they're forced to be a teacher and they're doing their jobs. So you have, that level of, okay, checking in on how is your team doing. Then you have the larger world of client acquisition, client networking. How do you get that out there and be seen if your clients aren't on social media or if they're not on Instagram? How do you get those recommendations? How do you advance your pipeline of work? I think this is the new challenge facing us because for me, quite a number of our referrals over the years have been because clients have had a party or children are in school with another child. And so you meet their parents or there's a play date and they see something. Like some of those just natural interactions are just not occurring. And so how are we going to, build a business pipeline? Because, we all have this passion for design, but what about the business of design? The business of architecture? It's something we're not taught in school. It's a learn as you go. You talk to your other colleagues and other people in the profession, but I find that to be one of the biggest gaps in the architectural education. And, that business acquisition, understanding how to do that piece. And especially now in COVID, how do we do that? I think we're all kind of learning and trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it is a real-time learning. I think that one thing that I've read, and I'm trying to do it more myself, is sort of just an FYI email, like letting your team know, like FYI, no response needed. I reached out to so-and-so today. This is what I did. So you're just kind of giving them an update, almost like you would a client. And you're just saying like, these are the things I'm doing so that just so you know, and like, it feels like a little bit of a needy attention thing. And I think that might be like the, oppressed woman in me coming out being like, I don't want to make waves. I don't want to like take your time, but I do think it's important to let people know, like, yeah, this is what is important. These are the functions I'm performing today.
Well, that's interesting, Lindsay. We do a team meeting every Monday on Zoom.
Yeah.
And so, we run through what everybody's doing, and so they could share with the other team members, which,
right.
if we weren't doing that, they'd be all working in a vacuum.
I was
Right.
going to say what we did that the team loves is that we like when you go to the doctor's office and there's that like 0 to 10 pain scale of like, where do you feel on this compared to the most pain you've ever felt? We do staffing and then we look at the pain index and everybody fills out where they are because we want to acknowledge people have like, we call it the background terror, you know, the background terror, like you're trying to work and there's like this monster behind you. So we just want to make sure people can express when they also feel when they're feeling bad, right? Like they're stressed out and it's not just work related. They're just, they can't handle their family right now, or they, you know, are melting down. So they're having mental health issues. Like those things need to be also part of the whole self, right? At work. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think
You're hiring a whole person. Yeah.
So it's so much more important for us to really take the pulse of our teammates and know what's happening. I mean, last week I sensed something in one of my junior designers' voices and I was like, what's going on? She has a roommate and the roommate's boyfriend had an exposure to COVID. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, you know, we all have things that are happening now and how you handle it. I said, you're going to need to get tested. And until we have a negative result, we can't have you on the job sites or with clients or in meetings because it's too dangerous. But I think you have to set that example. And I think that if you set the example, then others will follow. Even at job sites, making sure you're wearing masks. I don't know about any of you, but a lot of contractors and their subs are not wearing masks. And you could talk about it till kingdom come, but I wear a mask and sometimes I'll wear the shield too, because I want to set that example for a team to make sure that you're walking your walk and you're walking your talk. So I think that's very, very important that you be that example and be there for them and know that there's an open door for your team. So if there are issues, because we all have stresses right now that we never had before. So just to make sure that that open door is there for conversation.
I've had, unfortunately, 2 situations with COVID, and as a leader, I have to make sure that I filed all my, business forward plans or safety plans, but I have clients, I had a really bad cold. They're questioning whether I had COVID. I literally got tested last week so that when I go see a client with 2 little ones in Manhattan, that they're not panicked over, do I have COVID? Don't I have COVID? We've had another situation where one of the window crew people, I was really annoyed because they didn't even tell us that one of the Skyline contractors came down with COVID. I almost was at that site taking photographs that day, and thank God I didn't walk in. And then they had to shut down for a week. The stress, and we're much more in the field, it sounds like, than a lot of you, and a smaller company. But even though we work remotely, we're so much physically in the face of this, and we realize there's minimal risk. But I'm actually like, I suppose, I just make sure we're wearing the mask, we have sanitizers, we get fined, they inspect us, and we make sure that we are leading by example, and everything is protecting everyone every step of the way, including listening for those stress fractures, of, are we having a meltdown over there, or what is it? And it's very, very hard. I will say it's really hard, especially now when I'm listening to people worrying about the economy and worrying about where they're going to be and how we're going to get there as women, and and leading our businesses. That's what worries me the most. The smaller businesses, I think, have a harder time with that.
I think that's right. We're running short on time, so I just want to cover a couple of other topics. One question that came in was about negotiation, and whether it's your project fees or salary negotiation, money can be a very hard topic for women to self-advocate around. In my experience, if someone is offering you less than market value or less than what your level of education or expertise dictates that you should be earning, like, women are often told, just be grateful for the opportunity, work really hard, and this is a meritocracy, so work really hard and then reapproach later, and maybe you'll get a better outcome. Whereas men are much more likely to just stay at the table, keep the conversation going, and get the better outcome immediately. So I'm just curious, how how can we combat the tendency to shift the narrative, you know, and shift our narrative mentally so that we can like just feel confident in asserting ourselves and saying, this is what I'm worth, this is my market value, these are the jobs I'm performing, so this is what I'm going to get paid.
Act like a woman, think like a man.
That's a good one. But also, I think there's the wall of no. And many women don't have a wall of no. And having that boundary and knowing I'm worth this, I deserve this. I think that's a big thing. We don't talk about what we deserve. And we need to be deserving. We need to understand what we deserve in life and for the value that we're providing to our clients.
Right.
So if you can be in that space, and I think it's harder for people that are maybe my age, but I have to tell you, the millennials and this new generation, they want what they want and they go after it. And I've seen them negotiate because they come to me and talk to me about all of this. And they think very differently than we do. But their perspective is not just about money, it's the entire package. They're more concerned with their overall life balance than we were brought up to be concerned about in my generation. So I think that that's really important to understand different generational aspirations as well, and look at the cultural aspects of what's going on during those times. Because when I was coming up, I was like, oh, I'm just going to get a job, you know, like we didn't really care. Like we just wanted to get the job. And then when you go out on your own and you're looking at projects, there are projects I won't touch because they're not going to be a value add for me. Because you have to think about it. It's not just about getting a payment. It's about, what is this going to add to my client list? Is this something I'm going to be able to publish? Is this something I'm going to be able to use? Are they going to refer the kind of clients that I want? So I think that's a big deal. Right. And when you're working at firms, I mean, right now there's people that have taken major pay cuts, gotten laid off, but I do believe that the women that are coming up now are a little better prepared mentally. I'm not saying they're getting it in school because they're not getting enough of it in school. I agree with Carol, but I do think that they're prepared a little bit more mentally to ask for what they want.
Yeah, and I'll actually speak to that generational difference that she's referring to. I think for my generation, we know that the market's very competitive. If we were to just spend all of our times in the office and not dedicate the time to develop other skills, for my position, I need to understand energy modeling. I need to be on top of renewable energy technologies. I need to understand all these other aspects that are going to get me engaged and on top of the standards. And I can't do that just by, being in my 8 to 4 position. And so actually with city government, I get that life-work balance working for the public sector where I clock in, I clock out. Sure, I may spend some time on special assignments, but I know that I have that extra time after work to pursue other extracurriculars that are going to eventually, in the long run, lead to a better performance in my office because I have that knowledge from manufacturers or from industry trends that I can bring to the table and bring some innovation for. So I think that is super important. And I will also say that going back to that salary discrimination, I haven't seen that in city government. I haven't seen that discrimination between men and women. And so I think that should serve as an example for women that are trying to advocate for better salaries or for their rights in the private sector. Look to those government positions as examples because that discrimination isn't there. The unions are fighting for men and women's rights, and there's an even playing field. So it's a little irritating that discrimination is still there for women. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. I haven't worked largely in the private sector, so I haven't seen it as much. But I'm still surprised when I hear about this sort of discrimination, and it shouldn't exist because, again, in government we don't see that. It's literally comes down to your experience. You must meet A, B, and C, and if you can bring more to the table, that's going to get you that increase.
Yeah, and just to build on that, Farah, I also think that it's important to be a little more transparent. Like, I think that maybe our parents came from a generation where you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about money. Well, clearly we talk about politics, and clearly, religion is a part of that. And I think money goes right along with that. I was sitting maybe a year and a half ago with one of my best friends in the world, and we were talking, and we were talking about work and money. And finally I just said, so this is what I'm making, and this is what I think I should be making. And we're kind of going back and forth about it. And it was like, and she was like, yeah, this is what I'm making. And we were just like, we've known each other for, over a decade. And like, we just got around to being like, this is how much money I make. And not that that should ever be like, I don't suggest going up to people at parties and being like, well, if we can never go to parties again, but being like, hey, what do you make? But like, I do think that if that becomes a little bit less of a taboo topic and we can state with confidence, like that this is what we make versus this is what we are worth, there is, that dialogue becomes a little bit easier to have. And I think that the secrecy around like who's making what can kind of feel like another barrier to getting what we're worth.
As an employer, can I answer that?
Yeah, please.
I think there's another level of that makes it very hard to actually do a fair comparison, because some employers offer you paid holidays, paid sick days, paid vacation
Absolutely.
days, paid medical, paid dental, retirement plans, all sorts of things that are intangibles to the person receiving the salary. They don't necessarily calculate that value in,
Right.
and the cost to the employer to do all of that. Not to mention all the other little incidentals that a small firm owner might do, in the course of, business, lunches and, just whatever.
Absolutely.
So I think it is very hard in the private sector to think about, salary equity or comparison between people, very different than in the public sector like Para, where it's sort of a given. You have that many days of personal time, that many days, and across the board, it's a uniformity. I don't want to sound like there should be a socialist society either, because there's a really important aspect to the private sector, but it would be a lot easier for Farah to be talking to a colleague or somebody else in a public sector job rather than somebody comparing in a private. So I just think there's a lot of other pieces to people saying, oh, I make X dollars and I make X and it's not fair.
But it is, but it is for, I think for younger practitioners, I do think women are sort of culturized or have been historically to, as you said, be grateful for the opportunity, don't make waves, prove yourself over time. And, I think that I used to tell people, drink a Red Bull or two before you go into your salary negotiations. You really have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you're worthy both of that economic value and also of that's, again, sponsorship and mentorship, right? Like you need to believe that you're bringing real valuable talent to the table. And I think that's the part where I think many women, for some reason, don't have that, that hasn't been baked in. Maybe we all have because we've been at this for a while, but I think it takes a while to really feel that. So I always tell women, just believe in yourself, believe that you're worthy of that mentorship, sponsorship, that salary, and don't ever give someone the line, like take the lesser salary and prove yourself. I mean, it already establishes that they're somehow like behind, right? And
right.
I think that's a really negative and pervasive message for women.
I think the harder side is client negotiations. When there's a bias that you are speaking to a client about salary negotiation, and it's not really salary, it's like, what's the fee on the project and so on. And so many times I find that I am not speaking woman to woman about this. It inevitably is the male partner who is doing the conversation, and it's rarely both. It's a really interesting dynamic, and to be able to sort of stand up for what you believe is right. And then, often I don't want to use the word bullied, but or whatever, but you are sort of put in this position where they say, well, other firms don't charge that, or other firms don't do that. And I have to say, well, this is the way I do it. Yeah. And if you want to work with my firm, this is the way we do it. And that's very hard because every project is different and every client is different. So there has to be, some amount of disparity, but I think the negotiation with a client is even harder.
And making sure that you have a really clear contract that spells everything out is so important, because in this more male-dominated world, and Carol, I have the same experience as you with that. I have to say, when I've had just women clients, it's a lot easier. The negotiation is just easier because you're speaking the same language. But again, you really have to stand in your power. And like you said, this is the way I work. And if you want to work with us, we'd love to work with you, but
Right.
This is the way we work, and this is what we charge, and we bring you great value for it. So if you can be in your power and also really believe what you're saying, that's most of the battle. I really believe that's most of the battle. And if you don't get the project, it wasn't meant for you. That's the
Really
biggest thing that
valid
everybody
point.
has to think about, you know? There's a reason you're not getting a project.
Yeah.
So we did have a couple more audience questions, and unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time to get to them. But if we haven't gotten to your question, I promise you we will send them to the panelists, and you ladies would be kind enough to answer them. I just wanted to close on sort of an action item, because I know for me, during this time of a global pandemic and, you know, amplified social unrest and a planet that's quite literally on fire, I feel, and I hear other people expressing that they feel out of control of their lives and careers and future. So, you know, as women who all want the world around us to be equitable and good and safe, what are some action items, or maybe one action item that might help replace some of that fear with a feeling of agency? So, like, if you could give one takeaway, like something you can go out and do today or tomorrow, what would it be?
I can start by saying, you know, I formed a group called WXLA, which is a advocacy for women. I think it's like a, you know, it's a little side hustle that I love, and Carol scholarships, et cetera, all the good stuff. But I think that was just a group of women who all had shared experience that wanted to make change. And it started by reaching out and sharing our stories with each other. And so I think that building your own coalition or network of people who are like you, I think one action item is just to reach out to, like you said, some woman that you aspire to. I think it was, you know, Phyllis, was it the Avatar? You know, reach out to someone you respect and ask them to spend some time with you, even if it's just a cup of coffee over the phone in these strange times, and start building that network. Mm-hmm.
Great. Paula?
Well, I think that for me, because I'm in such a different scale of all this, I think the most important thing you do is invest time in things that help you maintain a positive space. If that means you need to have more time, I don't know if it's Pilates or taking a walk in nature, or making sure that you can get away from everything that you know, I mean, in our environments, it's always so much pressure and stress. And I think the more you can have that mental space, whether it's meditation or whatever it is, I'm not talking about advocacy to help other people, but it's really, you have to stay strong within ourselves to really, you know, excel in the future, I think, especially now. And I know I'll be focusing on trying to make more connections with aspirational women, like many of the panelists here, to continue to do great things, because that's the only way that we will pave the future, I think. You know, because we always can do what I think women, more so than anyone, any other counterparts that I know, that, you know, if you tell a busy woman something that she needs to do, she'll get it done, and we always do. And so in this time, I think we need to pave the way for change in the future, and more of what we're all doing, you know, in a bigger scale. You know, small company, large company, it doesn't really matter.
Absolutely.
I think self-care right now is so important, as you were saying, Paula. I mean, I love the 4-letter word of yoga. It centers me. I can breathe. It just puts me back in a really good perspective. And every time I go, I learn something new. I think we're going to be students for the rest of our lives, especially as design professionals. So just, you know, keep your boundaries, make sure you're putting self-care on the list every day, and look for the silver lining. We've talked about the silver lining. There is a silver lining in this, and there's a reason that it happened. We may never know in our lifetime why it happened, but there's a reason why we're all going through this, and it's done some good things about connection and bringing people together differently, but still in a really meaningful way. And I think that's important to think about as you move forward. And just do something good for somebody. Give something to somebody. It doesn't have to be money. Just give something to somebody every day or every week, whatever works for you. But always just think about it that way.
Beautiful. Thank you. Carol?
I'm going to say it's that work-life balance, the combination between focus and breathing. You know, it's like there's something about just taking a cleansing breath and looking up and looking around and just saying, you know what, there's many things to be grateful for, but at the same time also, you know, focusing in and realizing that you need to invest in yourself and wear your confidence and, you know, think about the larger world too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what helps me is to keep a sense of community with my office, you know, engage with them virtually in other ways outside of the work scope. So something I've been working on is we started this, I'm leading the Sustainable Office Working Group effort where we're doing this study about how many emissions are saved from staff commuting to the office by telecommuting and working at home. And it was a topic that really appealed to a lot of staff in the office. So it was somewhat related to what I'm doing as far as sustainable design, but became this special interest group about the pandemic and environmental emissions and this conversation that others could engage in. I think that sense of community and being able to talk out that we're all going through the same things is in itself a beautiful thing and has kept us all really motivated and helped that team building aspect. And I think it's kept our heads up. And at the same time, we're able to develop something like a deliverable that could possibly be used to justify telecommuting in the future. So it kind of goes two ways.
Once again, I'm in love with you. Thank you for that. I think it's really important. And I will just throw in here that at some point every day, like my eyes feel like they're about to pop out of their head from staring at my screen for so long. And so I've tried to dedicate those phone calls where I don't actually have to be on a Zoom to walking in my neighborhood. So like I'll be on my call and I'm walking, and like that just feels really like I can't be shamed for not, like, you know, trust me, I'm paying better attention because I'm on a call and I'm walking as opposed to going down a Google hole about something else. So it really, I feel like it's both form and function. It's helping me get out and get my brain space back. And it's also, you know, reminding me that the world is larger than the immediate issue, whatever it is that I'm dealing with at work or personally. So that would be my contribution. I want to thank you all for being here. I am so honored, and like this far exceeded my expectations, and my expectations were huge. So no pressure. So I also do want to say again, for everybody who sent a question through, these very generous ladies, I'm sure will answer it and we will email your answers to you. I'm so grateful for everybody who came and stayed, and thank you all for your time, and we're here if you need us.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. It was
Thank you.
great
Thank
to
you.
see all of you.
See you soon.
Ciao.